Caitlyn Clark. Just her name sends ripples through the sports world, a potent blend of controversy, admiration, and undeniable impact. For decades, the WNBA, the pinnacle of women's professional basketball, harbored a singular, fervent dream to break through. They yearned for a watershed moment, a transcendent player, a dazzling spotlight that would finally propel them into the mainstream consciousness, securing packed arenas, global recognition, and crucially, a path to substantial financial stability. That long-held dream, against all odds, has finally materialized. But the manner of its arrival was anything but anticipated, a shocking plot twist that has sent tremors through the league. It was Caitlyn Clark who ignited this seismic shift. And for a vocal segment of WNBA players, her ascendancy wasn't greeted with a collective cheer of triumph. Instead, it was met with something far more somber, akin to a funeral. A profound, deeply uncomfortable truth has begun to settle in. After years of grappling with the disheartening narrative that fans simply didn't care about the women's game, a stark reality emerged. The fans did show up. They just showed up, overwhelmingly, for Caitlyn. This isn't merely about basketball statistics or on-court heroics. It's a cultural tremor, a societal pivot that caught an entire professional league fundamentally off guard. Now, the WNBA, in a frantic display of damage control and strategic repositioning, finds itself scrambling to get on the right side of history. The burning question that hangs in the air, thick with anticipation and a touch of desperation, is no longer if they will embrace and fully leverage the unparalleled phenomenon that is Caitlyn Clark, but rather how quickly they can adapt to this new, undeniable reality. The detonation of hype and the uncomfortable denial phase. Before she ever tied the laces on a pair of professional sneakers, Caitlyn Clark had already established a dominant, inescapable presence, residing rent-free in the collective consciousness of virtually half the WNBA. Her arrival wasn't simply anticipated. It was an explosive detonation of attention and expectation. During her collegiate career, she didn't just break records, she utterly shattered them, claiming the NCAA all-time scoring record, eclipsing both male and female predecessors. She single-handedly propelled the Iowa Hawkeyes to back-to-back national championship games, consistently filling every arena she graced, transforming college basketball into a must-see event. Her signature move, launching logo threes as if they were simple layups, became a viral sensation, a testament to her audacious talent. When the WNBA draft arrived, there was an almost palpable lack of suspense, no last-minute surprises, just a ceremonial coronation. She wasn't merely the obvious number one pick. She transcended that designation to become the moment itself. The relentless camera flashes, the ceaseless press coverage, the unprecedented queue of major sponsors lining up for her signature. It was an overwhelming display of commercial and cultural magnetism never before witnessed in women's basketball. While the league had certainly seen legitimate, bona fide stars before, luminaries such as Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, and Breanna Stewart, all legitimate MVPs and champions in their own right. None, not a single one, had entered the professional ranks burdened or blessed with this stratospheric level of inescapable hype. And for some within the league, that bitter pill was incredibly difficult to swallow. Deeply, this immediate, overwhelming spotlight on a newcomer, overshadowing established veterans, cued the first, most uncomfortable and utterly unavoidable stage of grief: denial. It wasn't merely healthy skepticism. It was a flat-out, almost defiant resistance to the inevitable. The old guard, a collective term encompassing certain veteran players, influential media personalities, and even some entrenched league executives, immediately jumped into action, seemingly desperate to downplay the significance of the moment. There was a transparent hope, almost a silent prayer, that Clark would, well, flop, or at the very least, prove to be merely average. You could almost feel the cracks forming in the veneer of collective support before she ever set foot on a professional court. Had Caitlyn indeed stumbled, or just delivered a middling performance, The old guard would have undoubtedly relished their triumphant "I told you so" moment. The narrative would have effortlessly written itself. College is one thing, but the WNBA is an entirely different beast. You don't just waltz in here and dominate. The women who had painstakingly built this league, enduring years of obscurity and struggle, would have felt vindicated. The intense hype would have naturally cooled. The media attention would have mercifully shifted, and the old guard would have stood triumphant, their status reaffirmed. But that emphatically is not what transpired. The unstoppable surge and the explosive anger phase. Caitlyn Clark's debut in the WNBA was nothing short of astonishing. Her very first professional game attracted a mind-boggling 2.1 million viewers, instantaneously making it the most-watched WNBA game in over 2 decades. This wasn't a fluke, it was a pattern. With every subsequent game she played, the television ratings didn't just hold steady. They soared to unprecedented heights. Arenas that once struggled to fill seats were now consistently reporting sellouts, a phenomenon largely attributed to the Caitlyn effect. Her jerseys, flying off the shelves at a pace never before witnessed in the league's history, became an iconic symbol of her burgeoning superstardom. She wasn't simply meeting the immense expectations. She was utterly owning the moment, reshaping the very landscape of fan engagement. And that's precisely when the second stage of grief became glaringly apparent: anger. Once it became undeniably, unequivocally clear that Caitlyn's magnetic pull and burgeoning influence were not going to diminish, no matter how many dismissive eye rolls or scathing media critiques were hurled her way, the next, deeply concerning step was enacted: an aggressive form of damage control, not just off the court, but alarmingly on it. The league, whether through conscious directive or an unspoken understanding, seemed to allow for a heightened level of physicality against her during games. Players took liberties that stretched the boundaries of acceptable play. Hard screens, off-ball hits, and what appeared to be unnecessary contact became increasingly frequent. And what did the referees do in response? With alarming consistency, they appeared to pocket their whistles, overlooking fouls that would typically be called on other players. This pattern was clear and unsettling. The unspoken directive seemed to be let her get hit, let her get frustrated, let her second-guess if she truly belonged in this league. If the hype wouldn't naturally dissipate on its own, the apparent strategy was to try and snuff it out physically, to batter her into submission. And the toll it took was visible game after game. Caitlyn looked exhausted, her body visibly bruised, and her mental fortitude undoubtedly strained. Yet, in a remarkable display of resilience and grit, Caitlyn rose above it all. She didn't succumb to the pressure, she didn't cry for calls, and she certainly didn't fold under the relentless physical assault. Instead, she got stronger, quite literally. Following the Olympic break, she returned to the court playing the absolute best basketball of her life. A level of performance that could genuinely be described as MVP caliber. She led the Indiana Fever to crucial wins, shattered the WNBA rookie assist record, and earned a coveted spot on the first-team All-Star roster. All of it. And once she had definitively proven that the hype surrounding her was not just real, but sustainable, and that she could withstand the brutal physicality, the league and its observers began to reluctantly enter Stage 3. Bargaining. The desperate bargaining and the uncomfortable race card. With Caitlyn Clark's undeniable impact becoming impossible to ignore, the narrative reluctantly shifted to the third stage of grief: bargaining. This was a desperate attempt by those uncomfortable with her meteoric rise to rationalize her success in a way that allowed them to cling to their perceived loss of status, pride, and control within the league. The undeniable shift in attention felt like a direct assault on their established egos, and so they sought to change the story. The discourse began to subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, veer away from her on-court brilliance. Instead, it became about the structure of the way media plays out, a vague deflection suggesting external forces were manipulating the narrative. Then, more pointedly, the topic of race was introduced, used as a convenient, albeit uncomfortable, explanation for her widespread appeal. Why couldn't they have put the whole WNBA on that Time magazine cover? They questioned, implying a deliberate exclusion of other deserving players. The irony was palpable as they grudgingly admitted the undeniable surge of little girls showing up with their parents, the palpable fervor and energy that surrounded Clark's games. But immediately, this acknowledgement was tainted with a dismissive caveat. Well, but she was a white girl from the middle of America. This was a calculated deflection. They understood that a direct, unvarnished attack on Caitlyn herself would spectacularly backfire, alienating the very audience she was drawing in. So, their strategy pivoted. They attacked everything around her. Her burgeoning fan base was dismissed as not real WNBA fans, implying a lack of genuine appreciation for the league's history and other players. The media, too, became a scapegoat, accused of favoritism. The insidious narrative they began to spin was clear, pervasive, and deeply divisive. If you like Caitlyn Clark, it must be because of her skin color, not her undeniable talent. This accusation conveniently ignored the glaring facts. She was leading the league in assists as a rookie, a remarkable feat demonstrating elite playmaking. She was consistently drawing record-breaking crowds, bringing unprecedented eyeballs to a league that had historically struggled for visibility. None of that, however, seemed to matter in their twisted retelling, because the story they desperately wanted to propagate wasn't about her greatness. It was about perceived bias. While Caitlyn is fantastic, one critic articulated, maintaining a thin veneer of civility. And I think she's going to have an incredible career in the WNBA. There are women that were worthy of coverage prior to her arriving, and I just will not be silenced when it comes to that. This is a classic propaganda playbook. Repeat a baseless assertion enough times, shout it loud enough, and eventually, a segment of the population will begin to believe it. And tragically, thanks to this relentless, racially charged narrative, a significant chunk of the basketball world began to genuinely believe that Caitlyn Clark wasn't supremely talented. She was simply lucky, a beneficiary of an unfair system. But if they genuinely expected the monumental Caitlyn Clark effect to simply dwindle or dissipate under the weight of this toxic narrative, they were about to be proven spectacularly, undeniably wrong. The tipping point and unprecedented adaptations. The expectation that the Caitlyn Clark effect would somehow diminish under the weight of negative narratives proved to be profoundly misguided. Instead, the opposite occurred. One by one, seasoned veterans, players with established careers and significant achievements, began to express a singular, unifying desire to join the Indiana Fever. These weren't players desperate for a job or merely content to be on any roster. These were champions like Dana Bonner, Natasha Howard, and Sydney Colson, women with multiple options, women with championship rings. And what do they all want? To play in Indy. Not merely because of the roster or the coaching staff, but unequivocally because of Caitlyn Clark. This was a pivotal moment. There was a time, not so long ago, when influential media voices like Cheryl Swoops painted Indiana as a desolate, undesirable destination for top-tier talent. Even Diana Taurasi, a legendary figure in the WNBA, recently echoed those old, dismissive rumors. But that long-held narrative, that perception of Indiana as a basketball backwater, utterly collapsed. Indy wasn't just a destination. It became, almost overnight, the destination. And with that transformative shift, the floodgates opened, ushering in a wave of unprecedented adaptations across the entire WNBA. For the first time in league history, regular season WNBA games were scheduled to be played in iconic, significantly larger NBA venues. The Chicago Sky, for instance, will host the Indiana Fever at the United Center not once, but twice, on Saturday, June 7th, and again on Sunday, July 27th. This wasn't a decision born out of league-wide parity or to capitalize on playoff implications or even to celebrate all-star events. It was a move explicitly, undeniably, for Caitlyn Clark. Teams that typically confine their games to smaller, more intimate collegiate gyms were suddenly scrambling to book colossal NBA arenas, because they simply had no other choice. The demand was no longer optional. It was a direct mandate. If Caitlyn Clark was coming to town, more seats were an absolute necessity. Then came the staggering broadcast schedule. Out of the Indiana Fever's 44 regular season games, an astonishing 41 will be nationally televised. This isn't just visibility. This is an unprecedented level of saturation. The major networks weren't hedging their bets or cautiously testing the waters. They were putting all their chips on one player, confidently betting that the Caitlyn Clark show was worth primetime billing almost. The unstoppable force and the future landscape. This was the pivotal moment. The sold-out crowd, the astounding 1.3 million television viewers, the opposing team swarming her for autographs after the final buzzer. These weren't just isolated incidents. They were irrefutable proof. We live in a world consumed by fleeting sound bites and instant snapshots, where perception, fleeting as it may be, often screams louder than undeniable proof. And now, definitively, the captivating visual finally matched the undeniable reality. Everyone already knew the raw numbers, the broadcast schedule, the arena upgrades, the booming merchandise sales, the relentless media buzz. But this was different. This was the moment, the illusion, the carefully constructed facade that this was about anyone else, finally, unequivocally cracked. And with that, the game truly, fundamentally, irrevocably changed. The question of who should be the MVP favorite now had a resounding answer. When you talk about Caitlyn Clark, she averaged 19 points, 8 assists last season, but had an even better finish to the season after the All-Star break. After the Olympic break, she lit it up. What did she average? 12 assists during that time. She now has more pieces around her, more teammates she can get the ball to, and she had a full off-season. While no league is ever solely about one player, in this singular case, Caitlyn Clark brought tens of millions of new viewers into the WNBA, an impact that is simply beyond denial. Not just in the WNBA, but the world of sports. Analysts, players, media personalities, suddenly, they displayed a remarkably different tone, a lot more pro-Caitlyn Clark than they had just weeks earlier. Why? Because after what transpired in the preseason, the guaranteed sellouts, the record-shattering ratings, the sheer, undeniable gravity she brought to every building she entered, it was no longer a matter for debate. This season, many are visibly attempting to get on the right side of history after a perplexing and at times uncomfortable first year. Crucially, when it all clicks into place, it's evident that Caitlyn Clark wasn't merely riding a wave of sudden fame. She was relentlessly outworking everyone. While most players might have been easing into their off-season, savoring a well-deserved break, Caitlyn was a whirlwind of activity. She was jetting between high-profile appearances, commanding speaking engagements, attending NFL owner meetings, even making an appearance at the Masters, a veritable media and business blitz. And yet, through it all, she consistently showed up at the gym by 8 a.m. the very next morning. Every single time. No excuses, no skipping, no signs of burnout. That's not just discipline. That's the hallmark of legendary behavior, a drive straight out of the Kobe Bryant playbook. Whatever you choose to call Mamba mentality, however you personally define that unwavering focus and relentless pursuit of greatness, there is simply no question about it. Caitlyn Clark possesses it. She is noticeably bigger, stronger, and unequivocally fully primed to dominate. Her body is clearly being built for the grueling demands of the professional grind. Her decision-making on the court is sharper, more refined, and her confidence under the most intense, unforgiving spotlight has only grown exponentially. She is no longer just adapting to the WNBA. She is demonstrably preparing to take it over. And the so-called haters? The landscape is shifting around them. Some are now actively trying to get ahead of the inevitable narrative, strategically praising Caitlyn, perhaps to salvage their credibility, while others, unable to deny the overwhelming evidence, acknowledge the truth through a telling silence. The underlying sentiment, the lingering, bitter grief of not being the star, remains palpable for some, and it manifests differently for every player. Some openly display their frustration, others retreat into quiet contemplation, while a discerning few, like Sophie Cunningham, have wisely embraced this seismic change from the very outset. But no matter how individual players are processing it, the moment has undeniably arrived. The proof is everywhere. The magnitude of her impact is overwhelming. That preseason game in Iowa, it wasn't just fleeting hype. It was the undeniable rebirth of the Caitlyn Clark effect. And this time, armed with experience, strengthened by adversity, and fueled by a league finally waking up, it is going to be bigger than ever before. Conclusion: the game has irrevocably changed. The Caitlyn Clark phenomenon has, without a shadow of a doubt, irrevocably reshaped the WNBA. What began with denial and outright anger has, through a series of irrefutable events and undeniable metrics, culminated in a grudging acceptance that is now rapidly blossoming into full-blown acknowledgement. Her impact is not merely significant, it is unprecedented. She has shattered viewership records that stood for decades, transformed franchise valuations, and injected an unparalleled level of attention and engagement into women's basketball that was previously unimaginable. The narrative is no longer about if the league can manage or survive her impact, but rather how it will strategically capitalize on her undeniable influence to elevate every facet of its operation. The monumental shift is here, driven not by conjecture or wishful thinking, but by hard numbers, by an outpouring of fan passion, and most powerfully, by Caitlyn Clark's own relentless drive and captivating talent. The game, as we knew it, has fundamentally changed. The profound question that now resonates throughout the WNBA is not merely what Caitlyn Clark herself will achieve in her career, but how the entire league will rise to meet the unprecedented challenge and capitalize on the meteoric ascent she has undeniably spearheaded. This, without question, is just the beginning.